Once it's live. Okay. Hello, everyone. This is Linda Mavave coming to you live. And in today's video, we are going to be continuing with our talk on bookkeeping. Now, as some of you know, here in the US, the cutoff date for taxes is tomorrow, the 15th of July. But of course, you all know that in order to file correctly and to make sure that you deliver a good file to your accountant, it always starts off with you being the best keeper for your home-based business. And today I'm back with my friend Karen, who is an expert in bookkeeping because that is solely her business and she works out from home. So in advance, I'd already sent Karen some questions. So she'll actually be leading us in this conversation because one of the things that we want to bring out is how can we be the best bookkeepers for our own business? For those of you who are saying, well, I don't want to go out and get a bookkeeper, which is always the best, by the way. Then you can concentrate on running your business. But what else can we do in order to make sure that we're the best keepers? So over to you, Karen. Uh, Tell us, how can we be the best keepers for our home-based business?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on again, Linda. I really enjoyed it last time, and I'm looking forward to it again.
Sure.
So you had asked for 5 things that we can do to start the process of being a good bookkeeper in our own businesses.
Yes.
One is, first and foremost, is to separate your personal and your business finances. And this is a mistake that I see so many people making, especially when they're just starting out, and it's very easy to
Yes.
just put everything together, just use the same bank account, use the same credit card, but you will thank yourself later on down the road if you separate them out and have a separate bank account, a separate credit card to use specifically for your business.
Okay.
The second one is to track all of your income and your expenses, preferably in an accounting software, but at minimum, do something in an Excel spreadsheet or something like that. Just have some form of tracking your income and your expenses.
Okay.
Third is to make sure that you are balancing your bank and your credit card accounts on the regular. Usually monthly. That's just what everybody kind of does because bank statements, credit card statements, they come out monthly. But
Yes.
keeping them reconciled regularly or bank balanced helps you detect any kind of issues in your accounting.
Yes.
So yeah, and then the fifth thing that you can do, obviously, is a huge one, is categorize your expenses correctly.
Okay. Okay.
And I will actually be covering that a little bit later in one of your other questions.
Sure.
Yeah, going into that a little bit more in depth.
And Karen,
So,
the question I'll ask you while you're on that, you mentioned the word balancing, reconciling. Could you explain that a little bit more for someone who's saying, what do those words mean? How do I actually go about doing that?
so balancing and reconciling are pretty much the exact same thing. The accountants and bookkeepers call it reconciling. The people that don't understand bookkeeping, they know it as balancing. So if you know how to balance your own personal checkbook, that is just checking all your transactions within your checkbook against your bank statement to make sure that you've accounted for everything.
Yes. Yes. Okay. That is a good one because I remember an incident happened where I think I got so busy and I didn't do it for 1 month, only to find out that I'd gone on one of these websites outsourcing a service and I had been charged 3 times. 3 times. And I was livid, of course, but they were polite and said, it was a mistake on our end and we're so sorry about it. So what you're saying is very true. This is very true. You have to be doing that on a monthly basis.
And also, if you do it on a monthly basis, you will catch mistakes much faster, which if you have a bank, and most do, that if you overdraw your account, you're going to be charged a fee. So if
That's true.
you balance your accounts regularly, you'll reduce the risk of having an overdraft fee.
Okay. That's a good point. It's a very good point. Wow. Well, then take us to the next question.
Okay. Then you asked, what are 3 good practices to remember when when filing your expenses. So this is kind of going off of the last. Again, do your bookkeeping regularly. When you do it
Mm-hmm.
regularly, you can remember the small details much better.
Yes.
And secondly, don't have expense categories that are super vague. Like having an expense category called office supplies versus purchases. Office supplies tells you much more clearly what exactly gets classed under that.
Okay.
So, yeah, things like office supplies, I mean, most generally they are fairly clear. Things like advertising and promotion, or marketing and advertising, education and training, dues and subscriptions, that kind of thing. Make sure that they're pretty clear so that you can see at a glance kind of what goes under that category.
Okay. So I can say I'll pat myself on my shoulder because I think I did that very well. I did say office supplies and then kind of noted, my stationery and everything because it's so right what you're saying, that don't make a vague category. So can you give us an example, another example of a vague category?
Um, Sometimes meals and entertainment is a very fuzzy area.
Yes.
Um, Even though the category is descriptive, but
Mm-hmm.
meals and entertainment can technically, I think it's only 50% of meals and entertainment can be deducted, or the
Sure.
full amount if it was a business meal or something to do with your business. You can't just randomly go out to, I don't know, Wendy's and just have a good family meal and call it a business expense. There has to be some form of um, business going on to class it as a business expense.
Got you, got you. So I'll give an example. I think it was probably 3 months ago. I did meet up with someone for lunch, and I actually, did purchase lunch for both of us. And I was with my son, and we had gotten together because they wanted to find out how they could uh, have an online presence. She's an artist, and she wanted to know how she could have an online presence. And so, really, when I look back, most of the talk we had was really business, even though I knew her from some time back, but it was business, how she could go about it. And of course, it ended up where she said, I don't have the budget right now to. For her to come on board and be our client, but I've still continued nurturing her and just giving her some advice of what she would do. So, would that be considered as a business meal? You know,
I would say it probably would be, because your goal, your purpose of that meal was to talk with her about business. And
sure.
I mean, you said she ultimately didn't sign on with you, but
Yes.
it's like you meeting with a potential client.
Potential client. Yes. Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So yes,
Okay.
that can be deducted.
Okay. That's so just to, finish up on that topic. Let's say, for example, then if I do write office supplies, that's the big category. Should I then just say a subscription to StreamYard, for example, because we pay a subscription to StreamYard? Do I need to be that specific, or I can just say video subscription? Or do I need to make a note for myself in written form that it's to this subscription? Because we've got so many subscriptions.
Right. Normally, I classify any memberships and subscriptions like Zoom, Acuity, your whatever your scheduler is, all those monthly subscriptions. I normally classify those
Yes.
under dues and subscriptions. And you don't have to have
Okay.
a separate category for each different subscription. You can just put them all under dues and subscriptions. I like to break it out, like in the description, put that it was to Zoom or to Acuity or StreamYard or whatever it was for.
Got you. Got you. That's a good point. Thank you for mentioning that. Well, that's
Yep.
great. I mean, you're mentioning things that I actually have been struggling with. And as you know, as I mentioned, I think I got more clarity this year when I went to hand over my tax papers to the accountant, because, when she looked at my paperwork, at least I think I was half um organized, but at least she was able to get all the paperwork that I could give her because of some of the tips you had shared with us, the do's and the don'ts. So this became more clear to me. And then what you're sharing now, it's actually becoming more clearer that I really do want to pursue with all the tips that you've been giving us, because it has been very helpful, just from your last talk that we had, and even more so now. So that's why you saw I was being more specific with the questions I was asking you. Well,
Well, good.
great.
I'm
Well,
glad it helped.
it certainly has. Well, take us to the next question whenever you're done, Karen.
Okay, so you had asked for 2 free websites to use to start being a good bookkeeper.
Yes.
One of the greatest places to look when you have questions, personally for me, is the QuickBooks blog. They have all kinds
Mm-hmm.
of
Wow.
helpful articles specific to QuickBooks. If you're not using QuickBooks, whatever accounting software you're using, they most likely have a blog. Um,
Okay.
I do have a direct link to a particularly helpful article that QuickBooks has,
Sure.
that I can share with you then.
Okay, fantastic. Because what I'm actually thinking is that, definitely we want to have you again for the third time. But what we're going to do in the meantime is actually prepare like a PDF or a downloadable where we'll actually write out all these things, and be able to, for our audience to be able to download it, because this is classic material that you're sharing with us. It's not going to change in 10 years time. You're still going to be doing, it's good practices to be doing what you're mentioning in bookkeeping, like the category thing. I think it became a huge one for me, because I could see that, oh, I will get myself confused very easily if I'm not well organized.
Yeah.
And then you're
The
mentioning, websites that are very good for us for information to just go on to in case we have any questions. So that's also a huge one. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you
The
mentioned QuickBook. You said QuickBooks blog. That's the QuickBooks
Yes.
blog.
Yes.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
No.
Great.
Um, the categories are a huge part of a lot of people's confusion and why bookkeeping feels so overwhelming and confusing. And I am
Yeah.
actually working on a guide explaining the different categories and what should go under where. So yeah, there's that too.
Fantastic. That's great, because maybe what we can actually do in our next video is for us, which we were hoping you would do now, but I actually had more specific questions, so I thought, well, we'll leave it for another time. Is for you to take us into the back end of maybe one of these free websites, just to show us, well, this is what you might want to be doing. And then I also thought, well, just even on the Excel sheet, to have an example, like this is what you want to write, and to actually take a typical example of a business, a home-based business, and spell it out and say these would be the ideal categories. For example, someone who's running a hair salon from home, which some people are still doing. I was told of someone in Florida that, because of the pandemic, she's running her hair salon from the basement of her house, and she's still licensed, but because of the situation, she's just working out from home. So I think that has been a huge one for me, the categories and being more organized, getting your paperwork ready for the tax season. Um, and I think the number one thing, Karen, that I noticed when I went to talk with my CPA was that she has had a few cases where people came in with their paperwork from previous accountants and realized that the filing was just being done wrong. They had never bothered to check. They had just left it in the hands of their so-called capable accountant. And I'm thinking, well, when I looked back, I was like, that is a dangerous thing to do. Yes, you are the expert bookkeeper, but at least there are some things that I need to be doing, good practices, and to be checking on a monthly basis, but not to just leave it to the person who's doing your bookkeeping. So Uh, then Karen, can you share with us like when is your busiest time? Because you live in the USA. When is your busiest time of the year, and what are you excuse me, what are your clients expecting you to deliver?
So technically, just as a bookkeeper, I don't necessarily have a busiest time of the year yet. I've been
Sure.
thinking of actually getting licensed to file taxes. So I can imagine that the tax season will
Yeah.
be the busiest time of the year.
Yes.
But normally, what my clients expect from me is somebody to, a couple of them just need a little bit of extra guidance, somebody to kind of look over their shoulder, make sure they're doing things correctly. And then others are giving me a lot more work. Like one client, I do pretty much all of their bank and credit card balancing.
Wow.
And I also do some of their payroll, some of their inventory. It just, what I do kind of depends on the individual needs of each client.
Sure, sure. Well, what is the basic service that you could offer to any of our audience out there? So let's just say, for example, someone who's starting out and they're saying, "Well, I don't think I can afford to have to for a bookkeeper." But I know now, with what I know now, I can see that from time to time, it might be a good idea to just have someone you can say, "This is my bookkeeper." You know,
Right.
what? Yeah.
So, yeah, what you mentioned pricing, and I know bookkeeping is often seen as pricey, and it is generally, or it
Yes.
can be very pricey. I've actually adopted a pricing model that kind of is like, I'm kind of like the bookkeeper that grows with you, because
Yes.
I changed my pricing model to actually be based on your annual revenue. So no matter what, where you're at in your business, you can afford to have a bookkeeper, because I personally
Fantastic.
believe that it's important for every single business owner to have access to a bookkeeper without it costing them a fortune. So,
Uh,
yeah, my pricing model actually, no matter where you are in business, you can afford a bookkeeper. And, usually the clients that I work with are online based businesses, they're service based businesses. They don't
mhm.
have a ton of transactions anyway.
Okay.
So it that helps to keep the prices down too.
Oh, fantastic. That's a great model because what you're saying is then none of us as home-based business owners can have an excuse to have, shabby bookkeeping files, because
Right.
once in a while you can always say, well, I'll go to Karen, I'll go to my bookkeeper, because the whole idea, and especially having you here, is to encourage people to come to you and say, well, at least I can afford just one session, because you're able to counsel them and say, well, you have this kind of business, this is what you want to be looking at, because we have all different kind of businesses. Like one of my friends I'm canning with here, she does horse trimming. That's totally far removed from what I do or from what you're doing, but she still has, she has to travel, get to her client, work, and then come back, so she has to keep up with her mileage, that she has to report at the end of the year and the tax season, to keep up with, all that being calculated. So that means she has to keep those receipts. She has to make sure that she's keeping up with her mileage. And she might, in that case, for me, people like that, I'm always like, go to QuickBooks, because then you can turn on the personal miles, business miles, personal miles, business miles, without having to go through a hassle of doing
Yeah.
that. Yeah. I think another question that I have is, with everything being so digital, what is the percentage of what we need to keep up with, in written? Would you say, what if somebody says, well, I prefer to just do it the old fashioned way and just write things out? Or do you still recommend that, hey, it's best if you just go and open a spreadsheet and put in your categories, your expenses, and so forth? What's your take on that?
This is kind of a personal preference, but I would rather see somebody do some form of digital, just simply because you can access it on your computer. If you
Yeah.
have a hard paper copy, what are the odds that, like, if you're out shopping or something, I mean, we're all in the online space, so it's a little bit different. But if you have a brick
Yes.
and mortar business and you have a physical book or piece of notebook, whatever, that
Yes.
has all your income and your expenses, you always have to have that with you in order to do your bookkeeping. If you have
Yes.
something on your computer, if it's a laptop, you can take it with you, or if you store everything in the cloud like Google Drive or Dropbox, you can
Yes.
access that from multiple devices no matter where you're at. I'm
Okay.
personally a digital fan. I actually operate completely out of Dropbox. I barely store anything on my computer. It's all
Okay.
in Dropbox because
Dropbox.
I know that I have access to it no matter where I am.
Absolutely. And that makes sense. That makes sense. And I think that's, again, for me, a takeaway point, because you're saying with the digital presence, there's no excuse to say, well, I don't have that receipt. I lost it. It's on my machine. But you can actually be storing these things, off your computers, that therefore you have access to them. Because we all know life happens. You could end up in hospital, and maybe tax season is coming up and your tax person says, well, I need this document. I think of myself, I've partnered up with my sister. She has logins to some of my personal accounts, so that in case anything happens to me, she can just log in, get the document she needs, and pass it on to whoever needs it. So definitely, I think that's is a very good point that you're mentioning, that keep your records in such a way that you can have access to them no matter where you are in the world, as long as, of course, you have internet and you're able to access your records, because having just a notebook, we all know a notebook can get lost, can burn, can get wet in the rain. And that's it. So that's another very good point that you're mentioning up there. Well, are there any other tips, Karen, that you can mention that perhaps maybe I didn't bring up in the questions?
This one's not necessarily a tip, but I just do want to throw out there. I do actually have a Facebook group, and it is all about simplifying, demystifying, and streamlining bookkeeping. So, for anybody that's interested in joining my group, we can get you in there.
Oh, fantastic. I definitely will be wanting to get into that group. So what I'll do, for any of you that are listening, there are two links that Karen is going to send us: the blog, where you can easily just go on the blog and look up some questions that they have blogged on. And most of these blogs actually are answering questions that people have. It's not like they're just blogging, but they'll actually be answering specific questions that people have on bookkeeping. And then secondly, the link to Karen's group, and I highly recommend that you join that group. I'll be part of that group, because you never know when you will have a question, and a question maybe is already answered, someone is already struggling with it, and there's a solution. Because as Karen mentioned, this is a digital age. There is no need for us to have too many excuses like, well, I have I have this problem and I can't afford a bookkeeper. There's just a lot of free knowledge out there that we can utilize. But of course, uh, I am highly recommending any of you. I'm an expert in bookkeeping. And Karen, I can't wait until next year when you are actually be able to actually take people and be doing taxes. I'm sure you're going to be a very busy, busy woman. uh,
I'm
so
sure I will be.
So I think that brings me to one of the questions I've been wanting to ask you. Why have you decided to venture now into being certified to be able to do taxes? Was it because of the high demand, or was it because clients were saying, you know what, I'd really want you to do my taxes, but I have to go to a CPA or an accountant? What made you make that decision?
So it was kind of a combination of clients and personal connections. Like, I had a lot of friends asking me, like, do you do taxes? And I said, no, I don't. And I've had enough people asking me that I'm like, a lot of business owners do appreciate having a one-stop shop, somebody to do their taxes and somebody to do their bookkeeping. Enough so
Yeah.
that it kind of made sense to add in doing taxes. And I've done payroll taxes before, so I know that I'm very capable of doing it. It doesn't
Right.
truly scare me. There's a teeny tiny bit of fear or whatever going on there, but I know that I can handle it. So it was just kind of a natural thing to add it in with the amount of people that have asked me about it.
Fantastic. And how involving is it? Is there an exam to take? Is there lots of paperwork to go through? Because remember, you're dealing with the IRS, federal
Mhm.
government. How involving is that?
So, from what I understand, yes, there is an exam. There's definitely some studying, but it doesn't sound like it's too hugely involved.
Mm-hmm.
From what
Mm.
I can see, who knows? That may change by the time I actually dip my feet into it and get started.
So then my next question is, when can we expect you to be certified? When can we start sending you tax clients?
My goal is to be certified for the 2021 tax season.
In 20, okay. Wow, that's exciting. That's exciting. I'm so thrilled for you, Karen. I mean, when you did mention to me, I was like, oh, that is wonderful. That is exciting, because I did have a friend who asked me about taxes, and I ended up having to send her to someone that deals with me, because I remember just thinking, oh man, that's when I asked you the question. I was like, do you do taxes? And I think one of the things that's definitely going to happen for you is many of us out there are looking for the friendly tax person, bookkeeper who can sit us down and say, you know what, this is being a problem, or you might want to do things a little bit differently here in order to get a little bit more money back. And of course, it's all ethical, because I'll give you an example. When I went to see a friend of mine who actually does my taxes, Amy, she recently had a client who came in, was sending her papers to an accountant for 5 years. And when Amy did the review of the paperwork, she could tell that nothing was being done. She said it was a sorry account. And what has happened is that this client is in big trouble with, because there's so many, she's owing so much. And it's a problem that came about that it shouldn't have if things had been done correctly. So she is then with my friend, and my friend is trying to help her. And of course, you can imagine there's also the emotional side to it, that she needed someone who could be sympathetic and reassuring to say, you know what, it's all going to work out. It will take time to maneuver through this mess, but it's all going to work out. And so she was just mentioning to me that this client has really been thankful that my friend is there to see her through this, because it just petrified her when my friend told her that you are owing this amount to the IRS. Who wants to hear that? Living in Northern America, none of us. Um, so I think in a nutshell, what I'm also saying is that cheap, going to maybe the person in your neighborhood who's cheaper, who's the cheapest, is not necessarily always the best. I'm coming to believe that even in accounting, bookkeeping, something that just seems like it's about numbers and balancing checks, you still want to find somebody who's a good fit for you, somebody who can empathize with you, somebody who can sit down with you and say, you know what, I think we can do things differently. You can come out better if you do A, B, C, D. So, any of you that are watching, this is definitely something to consider. It's not just me trying to get my friend Karen clients. No, I am experiencing it in real life, that it is a great thing to have someone who's doing your books, whom you can communicate with, and they're communicating back with you, and you are comfortable, exposing your finances to them. you know, there's that integrity too. Well, Karen, do you have one last thing to share with us as our
Um,
expert?
I don't really think so, no.
There you go. I think I lost you for a few seconds.
Okay. Um, you did ask me the question though about what are 5 things that we should not do in our
Yes.
bookkeeping.
Yes.
Um, Definitely one of the biggest ones is to push your bookkeeping to the back burner. Like, I'll get to it when I have more time. The truth is, you're never going to have more time. And you're only going to put yourself in what I call the tax time scramble, which is
Mm-hmm.
crushing for a whole week, stressing yourself out beyond belief to get
Yes.
everything ready. It's easier to put in a little bit of work every single week or every
Yes.
day, depending on how much work you have in your bookkeeping.
Yes.
It's easier to do that than to try and cram it all in 1 week out of the year.
Wow, that's a good point. And I'm living proof of it, and I think it's from the last time you shared with us. I actually looked back and I realized, yes, it's best to just do it every day as far as it is possible. Because sometimes you being here in Northern America, we run to Walmart and you think, oh, yes, I needed stationery. I needed, you know, pens. I needed, sticky notes or whatever it is. And you grab them, you throw them in your purse, you forget about the receipt and so forth. And you think, okay, I'll put that in and, I'll make sure I record it. And 1 week later, you still haven't recorded, and maybe you've bought 5 other things already, and you're beginning to think, well, what did I get? I know I got something, and you forget about it. And it did happen to me recently as I was preparing for my taxes. I totally forgot about some earnings I did through an affiliate program, because I remember thinking, oh, I'll record it. I finally got it, I'll record it, and totally forgot all about it. And now, of course, my paperwork has already gone in, and I was like, you know what? A lesson learned. I need to just do it right away. Now is the best time.
Yeah, yeah. And the thing is, it doesn't take long. It doesn't take long at all. And then it's done.
And then it's done. Yes. And then it's done for sure. Well, Karen, thank you so much for joining us. And audience, if you're watching, definitely Karen and I are going to work on something where we we want to give you some of these resources, and more so because Karen is going to become certified, so she'll be able to do taxes in the 2021 tax year. That is exciting because I couldn't think of a better person. Like if I needed my tax to be done, to go to Karen, instead of going to someone that I don't know and not feel comfortable with. So definitely do take this to heart. And by the way, don't even think that, oh well, I live in maybe England, or I live in South Africa, I cannot contact Karen. As she has mentioned, most of her clients are online. She even helped one client of mine who was all the way from Singapore. So don't discount yourself and think, well, she only takes clients who are in the USA. She's more than willing to connect with anyone out there, no matter where you are. Her business is all digital. So feel free to contact her. You can find her on Facebook. And Karen, I will be putting the link to your website and your contact details too once I edit the video. So thank you so much, Karen, for coming. I really appreciate you coming on to the video. And audience, thank you for listening in, and we will catch you again next time.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for having me on.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.